I'm Kevin Riley. Welcome to Authorized Account, the podcast. Today with me is Arno Michaelis. He's a former white nationalist, but now he works for a nonprofit called Parents for Peace. Arno, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for bringing me back, Kevin. I appreciate it.
Earlier you were telling me that you describe yourself as a former white nationalist, but how would you define yourself as a whole now?
I think nowadays I better define just as a storyteller. I think stories are how we define our relationship with the world as human beings, and it really affects everything we do, for good, bad, or ugly. When I was a white nationalist, I believed a story that said because I didn't have a lot of melanin in my skin, I was different than everyone else and superior to everyone else, and at the same time threatened by everyone else. And it resulted in the most miserable 7 years of my 54. Today, the story I believe is that human beings have way more in common than different, that all of us just need to experience love in our lives, and that this process of human experience that we all co-create each moment is a basically good thing. And believing in that different story has had a corresponding effect on my life. Nowadays, every day I'm literally in a state of joy, and I'm grateful that I'm not who I was at that point. And it's really important to me to share my story so I can hopefully guide others who are under the influence of such ideologies to a better place.
You mentioned white nationalists earlier, and in my past I've used the term white nationalist, white supremacist, neo-Nazi, skinhead almost interchangeably.
Right.
Can you give me a definition of each of those and how they might be different? And also, not for the viewers out there, why should we care there's a difference?
Yeah, that's a great question. The way I see it, and there's no, I'm sure there's academics out there who have little charts and Venn diagrams about how all this works, but I'm just speaking from my experience, not only as being a white nationalist for 7 years, but also being involved in counter-violent extremism for 15 years, which I've been currently. I see white nationalism as like the big tent that all these other groups kind of fall under. So under the tent of white nationalism, you have the Ku Klux Klan. You have neo-Nazi groups like the National Socialist Movement that actually adopt the swastika, that some of them get their silly little mustaches. They call themselves Commander, and they try to emulate the Third Reich as best they can. Skinheads, which is what I was involved with, and to my knowledge, like the whole white power skinhead thing has kind of run its course, and it's morphed into different factions and genres now. But that was a more kind of street fighter, violent agitator out in public type of thing. They all are based on racial hatred.
Right.
They're all rooted in antisemitism. And it's important to make the point that anti-Semitism is actually not only what all white nationalists have in common, but it's also what all violent extremists that we face in North America and Europe have in common as well.
Really?
Anti-Semitism is the connective tissue of violent extremism.
Then how did you get involved in the movement?
By the time I started really getting into the skinhead thing, I had already dropped out of high school.
Okay.
And I moved into a rougher part of Milwaukee with a bunch of punk rockers. And then we kind of drove all the punk rockers out and replaced them with skinheads until we had this skinhead house. And so my parents at that point were like, they couldn't afford to pay my rent, of course, but so my mom got me a job with a friend of hers. And once in a while she'd come by and buy me groceries, but she was really just like, had lost control of me, and they just wanted to support me whatever the way they could, but they really didn't have any idea of what the depths of what I was doing. I have a younger brother as well who's much smarter than I am, and they didn't give up on me by any stretch, but there was a good bit of like, okay, well, let's focus on the other one and try to keep him from going off the rails.
What's the age gap here?
2 or 3 years, depending on the time of year.
And did your brother follow you in your footsteps, or were they?
Like I said, my brother's a lot smarter than me. He did dip his toes in the whole skinhead thing for about a year, and then he was just like, "Yeah, this is."
And I'm sorry, you said you identified as a white nationalist for 7 years.
Yeah.
Is that starting at 16 or 14? Where you
started at 16.
You're starting that at 16. Okay.
So I got into punk rock when I was about 14.
Okay.
Right when I first started drinking.
Why punk rock?
Well, again, punk rock's a big tent as well. And throughout the years, there's been many manifestations of it and many genres and factions. But to me, punk rock was just about breaking things,
right?
Smashing stuff, pissing people off, repulsing people. Before I really like took the swastika and ran with it, I was all about an upside down cross. Not because I would run around going Satan, and it wasn't because I actually believed in Satan. It was because it got a rise out of Christians, and I saw Christianity as like the status quo in American society. So I was like, well, let's poke at Christianity. And one of my earliest tattoos was a big upside down cross with the word "Amen" below it. And around the same time, and this is all as a punk rocker, before I quit high school in shop class, I made a big upside down cross earring about this big that I had for about a month before it got ripped off in a mosh pit. But like that's who I was as a punk rocker. I wanted to goad people. I wanted to shock people. And this kind of is what drove me toward the skinhead direction as well. There's a large faction of the punk scene going back to the 80s that are very like activist oriented. And to this day, like most punk is very activist, like fairly left wing, not necessarily Antifa, but definitely like we're gonna speak out against injustice in society. And in my day, that was just kind of getting off the ground in the 80s. And that was like offensive to me. As a punk rocker, I'm like, punk is about not caring about anything. It's not about caring. It's about not caring. And to that point, I don't know the truth behind this at all, but in the like mid 80s, there was a whole thing amongst, we called them peace punks back then.
Okay.
The peace punks were all up in arms because they said Coors Brewing had like unfair hiring practices. They weren't hiring black and Latino people. And I didn't give a rat's ass who Coors hired or didn't hire, but I really didn't like the peace punks. So even though I was, and to give you an idea of like what kind of beer I drank, Coors was like the good beer. That was like expensive beer. So I would actually spend an extra $1 or $2 to get a 12-pack of Coors so I could be sitting outside the punk show with my Coors hat on, whacking down a 12-pack of Coors, like just giving it to the peace punks. And they'd all be like, Coors is racist. And I'd be like, Coors, I love it. And it wasn't because I was racist and I wanted to like make a statement for racism. I just wanted to annoy the peace punks.
So are you hanging outside of these shows or are you going into the shows too? Like what's the
I was in the shows as well, for sure.
You have two opposing groups in this pretty energetic crowd. Like
yeah.
How does that? What happens there?
It ended up blowing up. I do not have a lick of musical talent my entire life, but I've been head over heels in love with music my whole life. And as a teenage punk rocker, I started screaming in a punk rock band, and I was actually pretty good at it. I could scream really loud. No tone, but I can scream loud. I can get crazy on stage, get a crowd crazy, and I loved it, and I was pretty good at it. So as soon as the whole skinhead thing started to manifest, and it was really like, again, it was me poking at the peace punks, and there was more and more kind of like angry punkers, I call them. Okay. Just the more kind of nihilistic, just break stuff punkers that I hung out with, all my buddies, who were like, yeah, this is pretty cool. And one by one, we shaved mohawks and the skinhead shaved heads and started wearing our Doc Martens and just started distancing ourselves more. We'd still go to punk shows, but then we'd start getting in fights with the peace punks. And because we were always the bigger, rougher, drunker guys, and the peace punks were the more kind of meeker, like quieter ones, that it really wasn't much of a contest. So we like physically dominated these punk shows. And then when we did start our White Power Skinhead gang, the first thing we did was start our own White Power Skinhead band. Because I was already good at screaming. My buddy played guitar. My other brother played drums. We found a bass player, and that was my first skinhead band.
And how old were you at this point? And what year are we talking about? Like
this is 1987. I was 16.
16. And what was the name of that band?
The name was called One Way.
One Way.
And we had a little motto. It was one way, the right way, the white way. We thought that was very clever. I wrote a song called Blue Collar Man, and I don't remember all the lyrics, but I do remember it was about me being this hardworking blue collar man, which I technically was, because I dropped out of high school and my mom got me a job with a friend of hers who had a t-shirt factory. And so I was printing t-shirts 40 hours a week, third shift.
What were you thinking when you would sit down to write these songs? Like what were you thinking about? What was the message you were trying to get out there? And the other question I have to ask on this, if so much of the messaging in the white nationalist movement seemed to be off base,
right?
How did that? I mean, you didn't seem stupid at the time. You seemed like you knew what you were talking about.
Well, the first thing that needs to be pointed out is that even though my parents are living beyond their means, like I was born into quasi upper middle class white kid America.
Got it.
Like I had the American dream handed to me on a silver platter. Before I quit high school, I was signed up. I quit after my sophomore year. My junior year, I was signed up to take AP biology and AP classes that I could have got college credits for. I got really good grades. I could have easily got a scholarship and gone to college to be whatever, whoever I wanted to. And the bulk of my peers in the suburb I lived in did do that, and they're living in big McMansions now with Range Rovers in the parking lot. But so like I had that handed to me. A lot of my skinhead colleagues like were from a more typical background, like poverty, really violent abuse in the home, moving all the time, getting bullied, fighting, like kids who had serious adverse childhood experiences.
Right.
Whereas in my case, I had a pretty idyllic childhood compared to most kids, honestly, not just compared to other skinheads. So I think when I wrote those songs, I wanted to, first I wanted to either repulse you away from me or draw you toward me.
Okay.
So it was basically like if you're vibing with this, if this resonates with you at all, I want you to come join my crew.
Would it have mattered what that person looks like?
At first it didn't.
Okay.
It wasn't until I got further down the white nationalist pipeline. And what I mean by that is when there's the strictly punk rock days, and then there's these kind of transitional days between the punk rock era and the skinhead era. And in that transitional time, there was just a bunch of skinheads. And among those skinheads, most of whom were white, there was also black skinheads and Latino skinheads. And I can recall at one point, like I got in a big brawl with some wrestlers in front of a McDonald's, and like my white skinhead buddies were just standing there terrified because I was fighting these big wrestlers, and my black skinhead buddy was the only guy who jumped in on my behalf.
Wow.
Probably saved me from really getting my ass kicked. And so and again, this was the skinheads in that day were certainly not all racist, but they were like kind of nationalist.
How can a skinhead not be racist?
Well, that's a good question, and it necessitates an exploration of the skinhead counterculture, which really it came about in the late 60s, early 70s in the UK. And it was typically kids on the dole who really didn't have any opportunity, didn't have jobs. And a lot of them were football hooligans. They'd go to soccer games and brawl the opposing team. And they wore steel-toed boots because when they did work, they typically worked in factories where you had to have steel-toed boots. And they would go out and get drunk and brawl all the time.
So the skinhead look is functional in a way.
It was. Oh, absolutely. It started out, it was also kind of a reaction to the kind of mod trend that was happening then. If you look at like old Rolling Stones or The Who, and they're all like kind of long hair and flashy clothes, like the skinheads are like, we're the opposite of that. Like as opposite as you can be. But they included among them everyone in Britain. So it wasn't just white kids, it was immigrants from Pakistan and immigrants from the West Indies. And they listened to ska and reggae. Like those were the first skinheads who by no means were Cub Scouts, but they weren't racist by any stretch.
Really?
And so in our transitional period, that was kind of how I describe our whole group there. And like I said, like remotely nationalist. And again, this is a lot more of taking the piss on the peace punks, because they hated nationalism. And I subscribe to the George Orwell definition of nationalism, which is that it's not necessarily limited to geographic borders. It can also be about an idea. And in that sense, the supposedly internationalist communists of like Stalin and Mao, etc., were actually as nationalist as Hitler ever was. Yeah. Just around their particular ideology. And I would actually say that the peace punks were nationalist as well, as much as that would burn their ass, but about their viewpoint and the way that they saw the world. Anyone outside of that was an enemy, and they were wrong, and they were an oppressor. So to kind of poke at them, our apolitical skinhead group, we'd have American flag patches on our flight jackets, just to kind of like, we weren't even about to go join the army or anything, but we really did. It's like, yes, we love this country. Yeah, it was really kind of lip service as a part of poking at the peace punks. And so the original skinheads in the 60s and 70s, that counterculture went on for a good decade until in the late 70s there was an alt-right fascist group in the UK called the National Front.
Okay.
And some of the elder guys in this National Front saw the potential among the white skinheads for a type of like brown shirt shock troop for their fascist political ideology. And so they started recruiting out of the white skinheads and saying like, yeah, hey, actually that guy who you say is your buddy there, the Pakistani guy, he's not your buddy. He's a problem. He's why you don't have a job. He's why Britain's going down the toilet. And you need to join the National Front. And enough of the white skinheads did join the National Front later on to spawn an entire neo-Nazi, like, white power offshoot of the skinhead counterculture. And this is also, it speaks to our depths of hypocrisy back in the day, because when I was like a flat-out white power skinhead, we considered ourselves the real skinheads. And anybody who wasn't a Nazi skinhead, we called them baldies, like implying that they're not real skinheads and we are. When actually,
from The Wanderers, the movie,
it was, and that's a great movie, by the way.
Yeah, I love that
there's the Turnbull ACs and the Warriors as well. So really? A lot of those, every time the skinhead gangs are in those movies, we're like, yeah. But it was. We considered ourselves the real skinheads, even though the guys we were opposing, which were anti-racist skinheads. Among skinheads, there's the Nazi skinheads, there's the anti-racist skinheads, and then in the middle, there's the kind of apolitical, sometimes they call them Trojans, they call them like old school skins, that are kind of closer to the original model of the 60s and 70s, where they're not racist, but they're drunken hooligans. I know guys from every faction of that group nowadays, or more accurately, I know formers from every group, and there's not a whole lot of activity nowadays in the actual look and going out and doing it. But that whole dynamic was happening, and it went on for a couple months, but then more and more, me and my guys would be like, the other thing is like people like, well, I'm white pride. I'm proud to be white. But I'm not white power. And we'd be like, no, to hell with that. We're white power. We're white power. And I guess the difference is like, if you're white pride, then you're cool with being around other people, but you're just like proud to be white at the same time. But white power is like, no, we don't want to be around anyone else. And you're going like full-fledged into National Socialism, into the depths of like actual white nationalist ideology.
Right. What's the deal with the violence and the violent nature of this whole movement?
So before I was doing what I do now, I was an information technology consultant. I don't really talk about that time in my life because it was just too traumatic. But that's an IT joke. All the IT guys will get that. But I mentioned it because I was doing IT for a doctor's office once, and one of the doctors, he saw me like looking up some UFC stuff. And he's like, how do you watch these guys just beat the hell out of each other like that? How could anyone want to do that? like this doctor's saying to me. And I just blurted it out. I'm like, you never been hit in the face? He's like, no. He was like horrified at the idea of being hit in the face. I'm like, dude, I've never felt so alive as I have when I've been hit in the face. Like when you're in a violent confrontation, like it's a rush.
What's the connection between pain and feeling alive, though?
I
mean, you can have pleasure and feel alive, right? Like what?
You sure
why,
can.
Why the pain? Why the violent part?
Pain's easier.
Okay, fair enough.
It's easier to go get in a fist fight than it is to go get laid.
So does this kind of go back to the laziness of hatred that it just?
It does.
It's just gonna jump. It's gonna jump on the easiest way. And the easiest
it
path
does. I do think it's an easy way out. I was always. I always did pretty well with girls. I always had girlfriends, which was an anomaly. A skinhead gang is typically like 30 guys and 3 girls, so not everybody gets a girlfriend. And I guess I was lucky in that regard. And I definitely enjoyed my time with my girlfriends back then. But I was if it was up to be getting laid or getting in a brawl every time. Now I'm 54, looking back, I'm like, man, I wish I would have spent more time getting laid instead of fighting. But
it probably would have been a lot more fun. That's for sure.
It probably would have been a lot more fun, and I probably wouldn't wake up feeling like I had my ass kicked every morning like I do nowadays.
How, with the women that you were seeing, how did you justify the person you were to them?
Well, all the women I was involved with when I was in the movement were also skinheads.
Okay.
So they And they were there for the same reason that the boys were there, in that they were girls who were having a hard time otherwise in life. Mm-hmm. And the other dynamic of that too is that if you're and this proceeds to this day, and I think it always will because of the misogyny in it, but despite all the misogyny, if you're a woman, white power ideology movement, like all you got to do is walk in the door and you're going to be very, very popular. Mm-hmm. Like everybody's going to be falling down the stairs trying to open the door for you and trying to woo you. And so you, basically, if you're a woman, you got your pick of any of these guys. That being said, I do know guys who left the movement because they said there just weren't enough girls. It's hard to get laid.
Well as a neo-Nazi?
Yeah.
I think that would track pretty easily.
My day-to-day was working, drinking, fighting, having my boys around me, making white power music. That was really the beginning of it. And as we went on and started to develop a reputation for ourselves, not just nationally, but ultimately internationally, all these other white power groups would start reaching out to us. And it's interesting looking back, like our social network back then were these transient skinheads who would kind of go from town to town and couch surf until they were kicked out for drinking everybody's beer and eating everybody's food and not working. But for the time they were there, each one of them would always have a battered notebook that was full of hand-scrawled post office boxes. This is the Ku Klux Klan group in Augusta, Georgia. This is a group in Fallbrook, California.
Like,
oh yeah,
it was just. And how was that shared around pre-internet days?
Literally, like people traveling from town to town, copying stuff out of these notebooks. We used a lot of stolen calling card numbers.
Okay.
So we go to payphones with a stolen calling card, and then we'd call up somebody in California, or sometimes even in the UK or in Germany, and we'd talk with them and network, and then we'd get invited to events. And one of a big turning point for me actually was about maybe 6-7 months into my 7-year span. We were invited to a neo-Nazi rally in Ann Arbor, Michigan.
Mm-hmm. And who is we at this point? Is it One Way or is it? Or
yeah, One Way was kind of the beginning of our skinhead gang.
Okay.
We initially were like, well, we need a name for our crew, not just the band. And we were all kind of radicalized by the Chicago area skinheads. They called themselves Cash. And to my knowledge, they were the first white power skinhead crew in the country. And they were the ones who would like import physical copies of vinyl records of British white power bands and then sell them in Chicago and sell them. And if you weren't buying the records, you'd get a bootleg cassette.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I first heard Screwdriver, and that's how that radicalized me. That was like my step to be, okay, I am now a white power skinhead. Not just white pride, not just yay America. Like, I'm white power after hearing a Screwdriver song.
The music, that song.
Oh, yeah.
That music switched.
There was a song called Hail the New Dawn.
Okay.
And it really just like raised the hairs on the back of my neck. And I'm like, oh, this is, yes.
What is it about music that has this power?
Well, music is the most age-old universal language known to humankind, for good, bad, or ugly. And again, I've been head over heels in love with music my entire life. I've always liked music that shocked people.
Okay.
So some of my earliest loves were Bon Scott era AC/DC, which I still love to this day. If it's not Bon, don't turn it on, is my motto. But I look at like videos of AC/DC live nowadays on YouTube with Bon Scott like grinning maniacally, talking about neckties and contracts and high voltage. I'm just like, rah, I get all whipped up again. And then I think again, like, wow, it's a wonder I went so far off the rails when this was like my first love of music, was this really amazing, but also very like shock jock band in AC/DC. Mm-hmm. So I've always liked that kind of music. Can we cuss on this podcast?
We have censorship, so you can. I'm going to bleep it out.
Well, if you're bleeping it out, I'll never forget when I was in 6th grade, a buddy of mine's older brother had a record from Fear, the punk band, and I put down the needle on the record, and I hear a song called "I Don't Care About You," and I'm just like, oh, yes. And from that point forward, I was a punk rocker. And I went through the same sensation years later when somebody put a Walkman headset on me and played Hail the New Dawn by Screwdriver. And it wasn't just merely dropping F-bombs that really like turned me on. It was Ian Stewart's gravelly voice talking about the race and nation and blood and soil and all the same themes that Hitler used to pervert the minds of so many Germans perverted my mind, like on the spot. I was just like, yes, this is what I'm about. I am a white man fighting for my people. I'm a white warrior. And then I set out to make that same type of music myself.
And when you were making that music, it was One Way, and then was that the only band that you were involved in, or where did that take you?
One Way went under when our guitar player, Pat O'Malley, shot a kid that came to do a drive-by in our house. And it wasn't because Pat was arrested. He had grandparents who got him out on bail, but it was because our other band member, our bass player in particular, was like, "Okay, I'm done with this, man. I'm out of it." That's what he decided.
You said it was a drive-by on your house. Like what drive-bys aren't an everyday thing, so why was there a drive-by on your house?
Well, and again, a lot of times truth is stranger than fiction, and things happen in the world that just seem to justify all of your ideology. So white nationalism 101 is that Jews run everything.
Okay.
And especially the newspapers, especially TV.
Mm-hmm.
And sure enough, after we were involved in a big riot that we started at a street festival, the Milwaukee Journal did an article on us, and we lived on a really obscure little street that was like a block and a half long in total on the south side in a barrio in Milwaukee. And they printed a map with a little star like where our house was. And we're like, well, Jews run the media, of course. Here they go. And sure enough, guided by this newspaper article, there was a bunch of Afro-American kids and a couple white kids from a suburb who thought they're going to be cool and go take out the skinheads.
So even on this one, we're not going to blame the people that are actually shooting at us. We're going to blame the people that...
We blame them too, but we were basically like, without the Jews, this wouldn't have happened.
Wow.
Like the Jews brought this on. And by the Jews, we meant every single Jew on the planet. We saw them as some sort of hive mind that it was always constantly acting to foil us and to take us out. Before the shooting of the counterattack on the drive-by, and one of the first days we moved into this house, it was summer, it was hot, and we're all hanging out on the porch. We called it porch honky. We're being porch honkies, sitting on the porch drinking beer. And somebody took a pot shot at us from the alley with a shotgun with birdshot in it. And the house had steel siding. You could see all this birdshot in the siding. And then one of our guys who was sitting there had like a face full of it also. And we're like freaking out now. We're a bunch of teenagers. Okay. And now we're like starting to understand what we're getting ourselves into. Like there's guns involved. This is the first time guns are involved.
Got it. All right.
Prior to this, it was all just street fighting. Mm-hmm. And then we went out and like miraculously sacrificed a couple days of beer money and bought 3 guns, and then stood with the house was like this far away from one house on another side, so there's 3 exposed sides, and we had 24-hour shifts of people at each side with a gun waiting for somebody to come around. And that was going on for about a week when this drive-by attempt happened. Okay. And then, so that was our confirmation that Jews run everything, number one, was when the paper put our address in there. Not only an address, but a map. In case you can't read an address, here's a map of it, because Abia Place is an obscure street. So here's exactly where it is. They knew we had guns, but it wasn't enough to just come get us with the guns. They had to get us using the guns. Okay. So they sat there and waited and watched until we did use the guns. And then, again, before the gun smoke could clear, there was like SWAT teams taking down the whole house. I was at work when this happened. All right. This is all just like proving every paranoid delusion of ours true, in that the Jews run everything and that they're out to get us. Okay. So this went on, and things got worse and worse. About a year after that, a really close friend of mine was out practicing hate and violence as I had taught him to, and he was shot and killed in a street fight across town. I wasn't there when it happened. Some of our guys were. And again, even then, we had brought all these misfortunes upon ourselves, and rather than look inward and be like, hey, maybe we should change course. Maybe this isn't the best thing to do and the best way to act. Maybe we should change something. Instead of doing that, per the ideology that we had claimed as our identity, we continued to blame everyone but us for all this misfortune we brought upon ourselves. And in this way, our lives continued to spiral down the toilet, and it got into this vicious cycle of blame and misfortune and blame and misfortune. And to this day, I see this happening all over again, just at a much greater scale with like every white nationalist out there. Right. And it's really, it's not that like some white nationalists are doing good. Every single one of them is just a matter of time until this cycle of blame and misfortune either wakes them up and they're like, hey, maybe I should do something better. And hence the reason why we're talking now is because I hope they hear this and affirm that thought, or they get killed, or they go to jail, or they manage to live a miserable, loveless, hate-filled life. And of those 4 options, I think the last one is the most unappealing to me. And I would say, honestly, the majority of people are in category 1. Most people do grow out of it at some point or another. But the more often we can share stories like mine and make the point that hate is preventable, violence is preventable, I think the better of odds of reaching someone earlier in that process. I have an archetype called Joe Pissed Off White Kid. Okay. That's the kid I talk to. He's a white kid. We're going to call him Joe, and he's pissed off about something or another.
How old are we talking here? Like, what's this archetype?
Your typical Joe Pissed Off White Kid can be as young as a preteen, 11 or 12, all the way into 30s and 40s. Got it. Okay. And honestly, I think if you're in your 40s and you think that Jews are out to get you, you're still a kid. Yeah. And you need to grow up some. The mindset there. So I can get behind that one. I have no problem calling a grown-ass man a Joe Pissed Off White Kid if that's how he's acting. But It's interesting because this dawned on me in the past 5-6 years, really doing this work. But the way you recruit a white nationalist is the exact same way that you heal a white nationalist nowadays. And I didn't realize this back when I was doing it, when I was 16 and I was recruiting other Joe pissed off white kids into my crew. The first thing I want to find out is what's going wrong in their life. What's their pain point?
Mm-hmm.
Is it they don't have a job, they're not popular, they're getting bullied, they don't have a girlfriend? 8, 9 times out of 10, it's they don't have a girlfriend. There's a lot of gender issues involved in violent extremism and a lot of misogyny. And your typical Joe pissed off white kid is angry because he doesn't have a girlfriend. Now, 16 years ago, or excuse me, 30-something years ago when I was in the movement, if I'm talking to 16-year-old Joe pissed off white kid and he doesn't have a girlfriend, rather than doing something helpful for him and saying like, well, Joe, first of all, why don't you stop drinking all the time? Mm-hmm. Take a shower once in a while, get in the gym, study, like make yourself into a person.
A partner that has something to offer.
Exactly. Yeah, okay. Make yourself into someone that would be attractive to another person. That's all not easy to do. And it doesn't happen overnight. It takes a lot of effort. It takes discipline. And Joe pissed off white kid doesn't want to hear that. He wants to hear easy answers. So I'm going to tell him back then, and the same thing happens on a daily basis, probably millions of times a day now, considering the exponential reach of white nationalism thanks to various parts of the internet. But instead, Joe pissed off white kid is told that he doesn't have a girlfriend because the Jews put all these black basketball players on TV and billboards and social media to corrupt the minds of white women, to make them think that they're the ideal man and you're not, Joe. And that's why you don't have a girlfriend, because of the Jews.
And Joe pissed off white kid, is he ever questioning this along the way? Or is it just taking it on face value, like that this is my issue, this is what's causing my problems, and that's it?
I think it'd be safe to say that the more traumatized Joe pissed off white kid is, the better that sounds to him.
But it also kind of sounds like you said they don't want to put the work into fixing the problems that they have.
Right.
That might be creating this. So
exactly.
Are we saying that violent extremism is also a form of laziness when it just comes to getting what you want in life?
Honestly, it is. It's a huge form of laziness.
Wow.
It's because it's always the easy way out to blame someone else for your problems.
Okay. Now, what was the moment for you that you realized that this just is not working?
There was a lot of moments, and I think when people ask me how I left, the quick answer is just exhaustion. Going back to the addiction model, if you go to an AA meeting or an NA meeting, you're going to find a room full of people who are all together because each one was sick and tired of being sick and tired. Being an addict is being sick and tired all the time.
Okay.
And when you're addicted to hate, you are sick and tired all the time. The only time you don't feel sick and tired is when you're actively hating someone. When you're either alone or with other people directing your hatred towards a group of people or towards whatever entity, that's the one thing, that's the only time that you don't feel sick and tired. The same way when you're an alcoholic, the only time you don't feel sick and tired is when you're good, rip roaring drunk. That hate exhausted me from day one. I knew why people were repulsed by swastikas. In the suburb I grew up in, there was a lot of Jewish people who lived there, and I was friends with most of them growing up. In 6th grade, I went to all kinds of bar mitzvahs and bat mitzvahs. I had a great time. Not that there's ever any justification for anti-Semitism, but like I had nothing but good experiences with Jewish people.
Okay.
One of my closest friends growing up, Dean Kaplan, was a Jewish kid. My dad and his dad would sit around drinking scotch, and me and Dean would sit there playing with Legos.
So how do you turn on your friends like that?
Because I'm an addict.
That was it.
I was addicted to the hate. And the hate was more important than friendships. It was more important than my family. The same way when I became a single parent when my daughter was 18 months old, which is kind of the tail end of getting out. But just to finish the thought, and I'm humiliated to say this, and it haunts me, and it will haunt me until the day I die, the same way all the people I've hurt will haunt me. But when my daughter was really little, like less than 2 years old, I would get off work and I'd go pick her up from daycare. I'd put her in the car seat. I'd go to the gas station. I'd get a frozen pizza and a 12-pack and a 6-pack, and I would drive around drinking the 6-pack with my daughter in the car, chain smoking cigarettes. And I didn't even, at times it didn't even cross my mind that I'm driving around drunk with my daughter. And my mother, who had smoked for a while and then quit and was a big anti-smoker, and I quit smoking when I quit drinking, and I can't stand cigarettes now. But my mom would be like, you know why your daughter's sick all the time? It's because you smoke in the house with her and you smoke in the car with her. And I was like, whatever, shut up. I'll smoke if I want to. And I did. And my kid was constantly sick. And I feel like a piece of saying that. I was a piece of doing that. But I was an addict. I was addicted to nicotine. I was addicted to the alcohol. It's not an excuse by any stretch, but it's a reason. And you could apply the same line of thought to me turning my back on not only a lot of Jewish friends, but also Afro-American friends, Latino friends, Asian friends. Like where I grew up was predominantly white, but all the kids who weren't white, like I was friends with them growing up.
And have you come across any of these people from your past since then? And do you think you feel that they should forgive you for?
Well, one of them that comes to mind is my buddy Neil Willinson, who's I went to summer camp with him, and we had a great time back then. And I think I went to his bar mitzvah. Of course, Neil was just cut out of my life for the whole time I was a skinhead, and him and I reconnected when I went public with my story in 2010. And by the way, like I think of Neil a lot just because he's an awesome guy. But he's not just an awesome guy. This is someone who founded a summer camp for kids who were HIV positive back when when I was out being a skinhead, Neil was starting a summer camp so kids who were HIV positive could have other kids to hang out with who weren't afraid of them, and they could act like kids and just grow up. And then he started a camp for kids who lost their parents in military deployment. And then he started a camp for kids who had a parent who was incarcerated. Like, this is the person that I had all these problems with, like this group that I had all these problems with. And Neil is not only a good guy, he's one of the best people I've ever met in my life. And it makes me sick that I hated him and I hated anyone who was Jewish or anyone who was Zionist just because of my addiction. When again, they weren't just good people, they were the best people. And Neil and I are good buddies now. He was a speaker agent for me for a while. He's the executive director of Big Brothers Big Sisters Milwaukee now. This lifetime service to others and dedicated to a point where he puts that before anything that he does. Neil's an awesome person, and he has forgiven me. He's not only forgiven me, but he's like empowered everything I've been doing for the past 15 years, as have many, many other Jewish people. So going back to that exhaustion, it was exhausting to fly swastikas all over the place when I knew why people were repulsed by swastikas.
Right.
It was exhausting to cut myself off from pop culture that I'd always taken for granted as a kid. To this day, I'm a huge TV, sports, music, film geek. I love all those things. All of those things are forbidden to white nationalists. They're all seen as Jewish propaganda, Zionist propaganda, to corrupt the minds of the white man to make him easier to oppress. So I couldn't watch the Green Bay Packers. I couldn't watch movies from Hollywood. My favorite movie, Blade Runner. I was at a white power like military camp, and we had an off night, and I rented Blade Runner from the gas station, and I brought it back to watch it, and all my buddies are like, you know Harrison Ford's a Jew, right? And I got pissed then. I'm like, can't we just watch a damn movie? And they're like, no, we can't watch a movie because it's Jewish propaganda. Okay. So like that was exhausting, having to go through that. What was most exhausting was when people I claimed to hate treated me with kindness. And the aforementioned boss I had who was pirating the T-shirts, aside from going at it with Metallica and whatnot, he was actually a really good guy, and he gave all sorts of people jobs. And I think after the T-shirt thing, he started a pressure washing business where he hired a bunch of other people. But I was wearing a swastika to my place of work. I had them tattooed on me back then. I was also very vocal. Like, everybody I worked with knew that I was a white power skinhead. And I worked with a lot of Afro-American people, a lot of Latinos, a lot of Asians. And every white guy I worked with, I was trying to recruit. And
were you one of the bigger people working there? I mean, did you have size to back you up, or
yeah,
or would this have mattered?
It was it's a factory. Mm-hmm. There were a lot of guys there who got been in plenty of brawls. I don't think that people were necessarily like physically intimidated by me, but they were kind of just like, oh, okay, skinhead. The guys I work with treated me with kindness when I didn't deserve it. My boss, rather than fire me for wearing swastikas to his factory, and when he had family that perished in the Holocaust, he said, he's a good kid. He's just going through a phase. When my mom called him in tears to tell him that it was okay to fire me for wearing swastikas to his factory, because my mom was disgusted by what I was doing. And my mom's like, I'd fire him if I were you. I don't know. And my boss was like, nah. And not only did he not fire me, he gave old skinhead buddies jobs. They were selling the T-shirts that I was printing. So these acts of kindness, especially on top of everything else, drove home this exhaustion and made it more and more difficult to maintain the level of hatred necessary. And it made my addiction more and more difficult. The same way that I eventually quit drinking alcohol because one morning I woke up with these pains like in my kidney that were just excruciating for hours. And then every time I drank, that would happen. And that's why I ended up quitting. Not the multiple drunk drivings, not the multiple suicide attempts, not the multiple almost getting killed, not the multiple driving around with my daughter drunk, not the multiple being drunk or hungover for the first 11 years of my daughter's life. It was when I've had these physical pains that were like, okay, this is killing me. I got to stop. I think every addict has a story like that. Mm-hmm. And so my addiction to hate, it went by the wayside in that same fashion, but I still needed something like drastic to happen to be my excuse to leave. That happened in '94 after a concert my band had played. A second friend of mine was shot in a street fight and killed. And by that point, I had lost count of how many friends had been incarcerated. So that was when I was like, okay, that's it. I'm leaving. This is the last of it. And in 1994, I left.
So was that moment there, that was the breaking point?
It's
a pretty big one.
The single parenthood and that second murder.
Now, you said that the kindness that you actually received from the people working in the factory was detrimental to your hatred.
It was.
Is that because the realization of the truth that you thought was the truth wasn't, or was it something else? Like what? Why did that kindness actually have that kind of effect on you?
There was multiple assets to it, or aspects to it. For one, it was really hard for me to hate people who were nice to me. Mm-hmm. When I was always like, it was third shift, so I'd show up drunk pretty often. Or if I wasn't drunk, I was hungover. I never had a lunch because I'm a drunken bum, and I'm not going to buy cold cuts and make a lunch and take it to work. Like, I'll just get a bag of chips from the vending machine. And so one day I'm at work, I don't have a lunch. I'm this pathetic hungover heap in the corner. And my Afro-American coworker, Lonnie, is like opening up his lunch. He's got a sandwich cut in half, and he sees me there, and he's like, "Hey, skidhead, you look hungry. You want to have this sandwich?" And I'm like, "I don't need a sandwich from this savage. I'm a white Aryan, Nordic Aryan warrior." Like, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, I'm hungry. And hunger is a pretty motivating force. So I go up and I just snatch the sandwich out of his hand. I don't even say thank you. I just go wolf it down in the corner. He doesn't bat an eye. He just goes back to eating his lunch, and he's talking about the Packer game with all of our coworkers. And I want to talk about the Packer game too. I love the Packers, but I can't because I hate black people, and I hate Asians, and I hate Latinos, and I hate white people who talk to Asians and Latinos and Afro-American people, so I can't go sit with any of them. Like the kindness drove home how wrong I was.
Mm-hmm.
And it gave me a glimpse of what awaited me if I could somehow get out of this habit that I had. If I could get clean, so to speak, from hate, that was the world that awaited me. A world where I could sit with a bunch of whoever I wanted to sit with and talk about the Packer game and not feel like I was facilitating the destruction of my people by doing so.
Were you realizing at this point that the hatred that was causing you this problem was your own responsibility, or that it was still being caused by some other force?
Especially because, well, that's the other thing. Like this was early on in the 7-year span, and I remember the place was called Concert Shirt, and there was the same boss who said I was a good kid, and it was the same coworker who gave me a sandwich. So like the hypocrisy of what I was doing is that hypocrisy drove home the truth that I was creating the hate, that it wasn't them who created the hate. It was me who was creating it. The other thing I think that really moved me was that I thought I was all about power. Like, to me, I thought power was, I've been in a ton of fights. I've never been a really coordinated guy. I'm a oaf. I'm clumsy. So like as many fights as I've been in, I'd say I might have kicked someone's ass in half of them, and the other half I got the snot beat out of me. There's many times I got into it with somebody who could box, and I'm just like, I'm getting lit up seeing Tweety birds and everything. But in either case, whether I won or lost the fight, I associated power with violence. Mm-hmm. That was power. I was exercising my power to go out and incite violence. Even if I got the worst of it, I incited that violence. It was my power, my aggression. When I was doing vocals, I was just bellowing at the top of my lungs. I'm just overpowering everybody and everything. That was my idea of power. But when these people treated me with kindness, they put themselves in a position of power by refusing to play by my terms. My terms were always going to be hostility and hatred. I wanted my coworkers to say, "You skinhead, you Nazi, get out of the break room. We hate you." That's what I wanted from them. That's what I was trying to provoke from them.
So you wanted what you were giving to them back.
Exactly.
Was that as a justification for what you were doing, or what was the reasoning for wanting that?
I wanted it back because it would justify
everything
I believed in. It would justify my entire identity. But when they put themselves in a position of power and they said, no, actually, I'm making the rules of engagement here, not you. And the rules of engagement are, here's a sandwich because you're hungry. Here's a job because you need to pay your bills. I don't care what kind of an asshole you are. I'm going to help you anyway because it's the right thing to do. And this is how human beings should treat each other. Mm-hmm. That's power. And that's when I first got a glimpse of like what real gentle power in our human experience is kindness and compassion and forgiveness. And as I've come to learn, it's so much more difficult to do those things than it is to be led by the nose by hate or anger or fear or jealousy or greed.
I can understand that. I mean, the idea of being kind to somebody that is a white nationalist, a white supremacist, I don't.
Oh, exactly.
Right. Personally, I can't say it.
Right. And I don't blame you. It's easy to be nice to nice people. It's difficult to be nice to but they're the ones who need it most. And that's also where it's most transformative.
Okay.
And it's also where it's most rewarding. In the work I've been doing for the past 15 years, I've been fortunate to help a number of people make that same journey that I've been on. And in almost every interaction, there's been times where I'm just like, I'm listening to this guy, and I'm like, I just want to beat the living dog shit out of this guy like he's never been beaten before in his life, because I don't like staring my old self in the face, for one. Mm-hmm. And for two, I now have the grace to know all sorts of people from all over the world who don't look like me, who I love and who love me. And when people are using racial slurs and they're using language that dehumanizes them, I get every bit as angry as if you were talking about my mother, because I love these people. And that anger makes me want to go like old school Arno. and just jump on someone and beat the dog. But I know, first of all, if I do that, I lose. Like, even it doesn't matter if I win or lose the fight. Like, if it devolves to violence now, I lose. And they're not getting. And I also remember that no matter how bad I got my ass kicked back in the day, which I did on a regular basis, and I'm paying for it now. I have arthritis in all my joints. You guys know, you try to fly me somewhere, I'm like, I got a note from my doctor. Like, but it's very real. Like, I'm paying the physical consequences now.
Do you feel anybody should feel bad for you about that? I mean,
no, but I mention it for one of the things I mentioned. I do a lot of my talks with middle school kids and high school kids.
Okay.
And I'm like, okay, kids, and first of all, when I was a kid, I never fails to devolve to that time-worn phrase. But I also want to get across to them, like, please, like, treasure your health and treasure your body and take care of it in these years when you feel like you're invincible. Because there'll be a time when you're not, when it all catches up with you. And I'm telling you about my aches and pains, not because I don't want you to feel sorry for me, but because I don't want you to be me. I don't want you to be down this path in any aspect, physically, emotionally, spiritually. It's toxic and deadly to practice hate and violence.
Right.
And it has a physical, emotional, intellectual, and spiritual impact on you.
You said earlier that you were at a white power military camp.
Yeah.
Yeah. What is that?
So it was called the School for Gifted Boys. And there was a group called the Church of the Creator, which sounds like some really like nutcase Christian identity thing. Christian identity is a faction under the Big Ten of white nationalism that believes that the true lost tribe of Israel are the Aryan white people, and that Jesus was a pure-blooded Aryan white man, and that everybody else are the spawn of Satan, and they will sit there with a King James Bible and point to all kinds of passages that they think proves this. And even back in the day when I was in the movement, and they're trying to tell me this, I'm like, it doesn't say that. Like, I don't want. How do you even get that from that? But it's a very developed, albeit like batshit crazy ideology. But they really believe that Aryans are the real tribe of Israel. And there's a counterpart. There's the black Hebrew Israelites who do the same type of thing. So, but anyway, the Church of the Creator sounds like it'd be something like that, but it was actually expressly atheist and very much based on like a perversion of Darwinism.
Okay.
It proceeded from the utterly false premise that like white people were a different species. And therefore, like, tigers don't care if hyenas eat or not. Why do we care if these black people eat or not? Mm-hmm. We should only care about us. We shouldn't support anybody else. Creativity, as the religion was called, was rabidly anti-Semitic, rabidly anti-Christian, rabidly racist against everybody. And that was kind of in the second half of my white nationalist stint, what I was into.
Okay.
And the founder of the Church of the Creator was this old man named Ben Clausen. And he had patented some kind of can opener in the 40s that did well enough to give him a seed to get into real estate, and then he made a bunch of money. And with this money, he's founded the Church of the Creator, which was like, the other thing about the Church of the Creator was, and this got a lot of flack from the rest of white nationalists, going back to Hitler's day, and honestly, this is where the swastika comes from, was from appropriating the Viking age and like Norse folk religion. The swastika was actually a ruin for Thor's hammer. And the Church of the Creator was like, well, actually, they would point out all those things. The Vikings were cool with North Africans and Arabs, so how are they racist? Why are we making them our heroes? Not to mention they enslaved and slaughtered other white people. So the Church of the Creator said, we should be looking up to the American cowboy because they were the white men who really conquered and gained territory for the white race. And so the church of the Church of the Creator was like an old style Western building in the middle of the Smoky Mountains in North Carolina, and the symbol was a big W for the white race, and then it had a crown above it because we were so noble, and then a halo above the crown because we were nature's finest creation or something. But I got into that because I was invited to attend the inaugural session of the School for Gifted Boys, which was the Church of the Creator program to not only indoctrinate young men in the ideology, but also to train us in paramilitary stuff.
Which, how does that jive with the crown and the halo being part of their outlook? I mean,
Clausen was, all of his ideas were utterly bull, but he was an innovator in the sense that he kind of bucked a lot of the old tropes of white nationalism going back to Hitler.
Okay.
And he was like, well, Hitler was great and everything, but this is a new thing. So that's why we don't use the swastika as our symbol. We have this new symbol that's talking about, and also making points that he espoused racial socialism rather than national socialism.
What's the difference?
National socialism was, while it was very much about the Aryan race, it was also very much about Germany.
Okay.
Whereas racial socialism is about the white race as our nation, not geographic borders.
All right.
And we would always use the analogy of, like, you got your Joe working class white guy in America, and he's watching a boxing match. And if it's a black American boxer against a white Russian boxer, he's going to root for the black guy because he's American, when he should be rooting for the white guy regardless of what nationality is. That's how we'd explain racial socialism.
Oh, okay.
And socialism in the sense that, and it's funny because from the day one of National Socialism, Hitler said how it was not only about anti-Semitism and racism, but it was also about opposing communism. But he's a socialist. Like the state is greater than the individual. The individual means nothing. And that was the socialism piece of our racial socialism as well, was that you as an individual don't mean anything. All you have is your race. And your race is what must be cherished and maintained and fought for above all else.
Okay.
So that was the socialist aspect of it.
Got it.
And so I was invited to this School for Gifted Boys. It was me and two of my buddies. I was 18. We'd spend the morning doing Bible study because Clausen had written a book called The White Man's Bible, which again was inherently atheist, like going off. And I remember, so Clausen was this like doddering old man that we knew going to meet him that we weren't going to be really impressed by our, rough street fighter kind of standards. But we meet him and he's like maybe 5'3", prototypical old man with his pants pulled up to his armpits, like the little white golf shoes. And he talks like Droopy Dog. He's like, the white race is nature's finest creation.
This picture you're painting doesn't exactly sound like it
didn't. And we were like, we did our first Bible study and we all went back and we were all kind of snickering and laughing, and we're like, we shouldn't be laughing. Like, this is Ben Clausen. He started creativity, but he's just such a dork. Like, he's just such a. We didn't really respect him at all, and things got heated when. First of all, he did. There was no questioning anything in the white man's Bible. Everything he said had to be just accepted as a law of physics. There was no questioning anything. And one of his things was that the planet Earth was going to be our one and only home.
Okay.
And he was very adamant about this. He's like, exploring space is a waste of the white man's time. And so his plan was like, we were going to conquer the entire planet Earth. And then it was going to be this wonderful, whiter and brighter world, and that was it. And we have no impetus to go looking elsewhere for places to live. And I was like, we had to call him Pontifex, too. He was the Pontifex Maximus. So I would raise my hand and I'd be like, but Pontifex, our race is a race of explorers and conquerors. And once we've explored and conquered the entire planet, doesn't it just make sense that we would go and explore and conquer space? And he would be like, no, the planet Earth is the white race's one and only home. And that was him getting really mad. And I was like trying not to laugh at him, and my buddies were trying not to laugh. But that was like our mornings at the school for gifted boys. And then in the afternoon, they had these like crazy hillbilly mountain men who were like ex-Green Berets, and we'd spend the afternoon shooting like all kinds of guns, which we loved. We brought all our guns. And then after that, we would go running through the Smoky Mountains, like learning how to build and avoid man traps, how to evade people, how to do car bombs, how to rappel down mine shafts, and that was a lot of fun. We loved it.
How good were you at these things?
We were all very good at it. Me and my two buddies were all very athletic, and we loved it. The other like funny wild card in there was that there was like a counselor who was supposed to kind of keep us in line, and there's this guy named A.W., and he was maybe a couple years older than us, but really kind of like not an alpha type. Like if he would have come by our crew, we would have let him hang around if he had beer money, but he probably would have got bullied and beat up. And we get to the school for gifted boys, and they're like, "This is A.W. He's gonna be your boss," and we're like, really? Okay.
Yeah.
Like we did not. AW was not our boss, and to make matters worse, like all the rappelling and climbing and swimming and all these things that we were really good at, AW was not good at any of them, and he would just fail spectacularly every time we tried to do something, and so he became like the laughing stock of me and my buddies, and the Pontifex was getting angry about it by the end of the 2 weeks that we weren't respecting AW, and it was in many ways it was really comical, but at the same time it was really like diabolical and toxic, and it led me to darker places from there.
What caused that switch? Instead of
I did feel a great deal of responsibility.
Yeah.
The whole rave scene days was magical, and it was very formulative and transformative in the sense that I literally hung out with the polar opposite counterculture of where I was.
How did you get into that?
I had when I left the movement, I had one friend who was not in the movement, and he had dipped his toes in it for like 6 months and then kind of cut out, but I still kept in touch with him. And he was my one non-skinhead friend, and I would hang out with him. And he wasn't in college, but he lived kind of by the college and with a bunch of college kids, and they had kind of a party house. And I was over there every Saturday, and I'm like, wow, this is crazy. Like, people are having fun and nobody's hating each other. No, there's no fighting. Like, just that kind of blew my mind. But then he started going to rave parties in Chicago, and he'd go every Saturday night. And he'd always invite me, and I'm like, I don't want to. I can't dance. Like I only know how to dance on people's heads. I don't know. I can't. I couldn't picture myself dancing to techno or house music or what. I was like, duh. But I got so tired of being alone every Saturday that I said, fine, I'll go. And so we went to one in Chicago. I wrote a chapter about it in my first book, and it was love at first sight. Like it just absolutely blew my mind to see thousands and thousands of people spend like 12, 14 hours together in this state of complete bliss where you literally felt like just like a cell in an organism, like just, and there was like a genuine spiritual love between everyone there.
Did you accept that right away, or were you?
I did.
Okay.
I did. Yeah. I've always been kind of a Buddhist at heart, that there's always a bit of beginner's mind to me where I'm like, it's always been easy to be like, okay, I'm done with that. Hey, what's this? Like, okay, I'm into this now. And so it wasn't hard. And also because it felt so good. It felt amazing and at the time it was before I had all my swastikas covered up. And at the time, there people who forgave me and accepted me and said it didn't matter where I was. It mattered where I was in the past. It mattered where I was now. And
you went to this rave with the tattoos, the swastikas out?
Yeah.
And you were accepted?
I sweat like I'm in a $250,000 sweating contest.
I've been there before.
So like when I'm at a party and I'm dancing for a half hour, much less 5 hours, and yes, there's substances involved, like I looked like I jumped in a pool with my clothes on. And my whole thing was like after a party I'd wring my shirt out and the sweat would pour out of it. And some of the more posh raver kids would like look at me and I'm like, this ain't no fashion show. I'm here to dance. And that was like how much, and the real down kids were like, yeah, Arno. But it was amazing because it was a proof of concept of how life could be. And people can love each other. And we can transcend all these bull differences of race and religion and nationality and language, and that underneath it we're all human beings. Like the rave scene demonstrated that for me over and over and over again for almost another 7 years, but I really hadn't reconciled my past, and I wasn't avoidant of it. There was many like after parties or after parties where I'm still up 16 hours later and me and my buddies are drinking ice cold Boone's Farm out of a cooler on a hill or something as the sun's setting after it already rises. And I'm like, you know, I used to be a neo-Nazi skinhead. And sometimes I'd tell some stories and everybody would be like, wow, that's crazy. So it's like I was never shy about talking about it, but I never had the idea to like really, I use the analogy of cleaning a wound.
Okay.
I was essentially like scrubbing the scabs off a spiritual wound that was actually a lot more painful than that physical process was, because I had to go rip these scabs off that had festered for years and a wound that had never been properly cleaned. Because while I would talk about it here and there, I was mainly just avoiding it with substances and house music and partying and not really facing it. So now that I'm clean, and I was clean at the time. I use cannabis now moderately and responsibly, but back then I was just straight sober, and I didn't have anything to mask or numb my past, and it sucked. It was really difficult, and it was this morbid suicidal depression that lasted almost a year. My daughter once again saved my life. Like she literally grabbed me by the collar and was like, "Dad, like I need a dad. Snap out of it." She was like,
how old was she at this point?
Like 13.
13. And she's the one basically becoming an adult.
Yeah, exactly. So it was at her instigating, like I started writing, and when I started writing, I started feeling better about things, and that eventually led to me going public with my story in 2010. Okay. And so, but when I first did it, it was self-preservation. It was like, if I don't reconcile my past, I'm going to die.
White Power military camp that you went to was run by a group by a guy that had invented something. I was able to fund it. Where does the funding for a lot of these movements come from? Because
it's an interesting question, because in the late 1980s, early 1990s, there was no Kickstarter. There was no crowdfunding. It really didn't exist. So back in those days, it really was up to individuals like Clausen, who had managed to make some money somehow, which again is an outlier, because when you hate Jews and you hate everyone who doesn't look like you and you're afraid of them, it's just not good business.
No.
Like, you're not going to be successful at anything you do, really. And so of course, Henry Ford being a raging exception, but not to say it doesn't happen, but for the most part, it makes realizing that kind of success even more of a long shot than it would be for any average person. So the only real funding I knew of back then was the money that Clausen had made.
Okay.
We had our own church in Milwaukee, which was a warehouse that we rented out, and I think it cost like $400 or $500 a month or something, and we all chipped in for that. And when I say we, like, we had probably 30, 40 people that would all chip in $20, $30 a month.
And most of them for work, what were they doing? Or where is this money coming from?
The majority, pretty much all of us, just had menial, low-wage jobs, doing whatever. So yeah, there weren't a lot of any like high wage earners involved in my level. Nowadays, well, of course, they're not going to allow you to do a expressly white nationalist thing on Kickstarter, and thank God, more power to them for not allowing that. there still are ways that white nationalists can crowdsource essentially from their online networks.
Really? How so?
Typically with cryptocurrency.
Okay.
But it really is, it's the type of thing where everybody chips in. It's the same kind of concept. Like everybody's just chipping in where they can chip in. And unfortunately, that does result in quite a bit more funds being raised nowadays than there were in my day.
And how does that affect things now that they're getting more money from other areas, from crypto and whatnot?
It kind of goes into this whack-a-mole effect. So to give you for example, I've done a lot of work with like every big tech company there is. And sadly, this doesn't seem to be as much of a priority as it used to. But in the 2010s, big tech companies were extremely concerned and very dedicated to make their platforms less conducive to the spread of hate. And I've done a lot of talks at these companies as part of that, a lot of workshops. And beyond just bringing people like me in, they would have quite sizable departments of their own who were dedicated to keep hate off the platform. What that results in, I can use YouTube for an example. YouTube is still, sadly, I think, a very considerable vector for hate speech and hate ideology, despite the fact that there's entire teams of people meant to keep that kind of content off of YouTube. But be that as it may, the more extreme hate content that would get flagged and taken down off of YouTube, it needs to have some sort of other home. So a lot of what this white nationalist crowdfunding does is over the years, there has been like a white nationalist version of every popular social media that there is. Like a white nationalist Twitter, a white nationalist YouTube, a white nationalist Instagram, a white nationalist Facebook. So when they get kicked out of all these, the conventional platforms, they go start their own platforms. And I learned this from working like with Google. And it was funny, and and as an IT guy, I appreciate this as well. The Google people were saying like, well, when you go to start your own video streaming platform, you realize that it can't really run off of a computer box in your basement.
Like, I was going to say, where I mean, starting up a tech company, that's not a cheap thing. Where would the funding come from that?
So a lot of these white nationalist simulacrums of things like YouTube and whatnot tend to be really third-rate, if not 10th-rate knockoffs that can't perform properly and really don't function properly. So it's kind of like the thought that counts type thing, and it does. None of them take off, obviously, the way that their conventional counterparts have. But that's definitely an issue nowadays, and I think going back to a kinetic approach, and maybe not necessarily actual kinetic force being used, but law enforcement pressure being put on domestic terrorists. And the other thing, too, is that the whole domestic terrorist label is kind of passé, in my opinion, because any bad actor, white nationalist group in the United States that is propagating hate and violence, there's none of them that aren't connected to other groups around the world, which automatically qualifies them as a foreign terrorist entity.
Got it.
According to the letter of the laws that we have about terrorism. And those laws are being exercised more and more often, which I'm all in favor of. And I would want to see those laws prosecuted to the same degree that ISIS has been pursued by the CIA and by the FBI, because these are groups that are every bit as dangerous and need to be taken every bit as seriously as ISIS et al.
And here in the United States, how do you feel about the level of hate that and discourse that we might see in the national discourse right now? Do you think it is heading in a which direction do you think it's heading in?
I learned a lot from my Punjabi friends after the Sikh temple shooting. This tattoo I have here is it says Chardikala in Hindi script, actually. Chardikala is the belief, it translates loosely as relentless optimism. And I witnessed this from the Punjabi community after the temple shooting. Whereas even days after the shooting had happened and before people had even been buried, the people in the Punjabi community were saying, like, we're not going to hate anyone back. And Chardikala means that everything happening in the world, good, bad, or ugly, is a divine creation, and therefore it's something to be grateful for. So they're not necessarily grateful that their temple was attacked and grateful that 7 people were killed, but they are grateful for the community that all showed up and stood with them after it happened. They're grateful for all the connections that happened afterwards. My dear friend Pardeep Singh Kalika, his father Satwant was the aforementioned man who was the last person killed that day. And Pardeep and I have written a book together called The Gift of Our Wounds. We've done talks all over the world. We've done a lot of work with young people. And again, Pardeep's never going to be grateful for his father's murder, but he is grateful that him and I met. He's grateful for all the work we've been able to do. And I mention this just because if you ask me if I'm optimistic or not, I have to run through that in order to say, like, I'm going to find a way to be optimistic, because we literally create the world we live in by the way we look at it. And I think what makes me most pessimistic are these damn things, which I brought out before. But screens are well in the process of, like, killing human society, I believe. When the more time we spend on a screen, the less time we spend talking with one another in person, actually engaging with people face to face, the more cut off we become from each other, the more isolated we become, and the easier it is to hate people. It was easy for me to hate people when I was a white nationalist, as long as somebody wasn't handing me a half of a sandwich in person.
How do you think you would have been today if the dawn of the internet age and smartphones had been in the, say, 70s and 80s?
It's hard to say. I even as things were for me, there were all sorts of planets that aligned to, thank God, lead me from that place. And I think if one of them would have been missing, I could have became further embedded in the movement when that second murder happened, instead of using it as an excuse to leave. And the danger of the screens is, again, talking about addiction, when I was drinking, like, I had to physically go get my beer. The beer wasn't just in the air. I had to go to the liquor store and buy it. In Wisconsin, you can't get it after 9, so I had to plan. It all had to be obtained before 9:00 p.m. When you're addicted to hate, all you need is a screen and a data connection, and you literally are plugged into a main line of all the hate you can possibly wallow in. At Parents for Peace, every single case we have is about little Joe pissed off white kid, won't come out of his room, he's on the internet for hours and hours a day. The first thing we tell these parents, and this can't be done in just one fell stroke typically, it takes a lot of maneuvering and getting into position and, like, how are we going to enforce this? But the first thing we tell them basically is, like, if you don't cut off this kid's internet, he's never going to get better. As long as he has access to the substance he's addicted to, he's going to be in the throes of the addiction. So what that brings me to, in a larger scale, if we're talking about our polarized society, our society is polarized because of these screens. Society has always been polarized. You're looking back through history. And another really important thing that we always lose sight of, I think, because of the screens again, is that there's so many things in human society at this moment in time right now that are exponentially better than they've ever been. people are living longer. There's less infant mortality, which means there's going to be more people again. So these are problems these are good things that also kind of compound the problem, but we lose sight of like how much we have going for us and how great life is nowadays. Mm-hmm. Because these screens like keep clawing us back to misery.
Got it.
We're rather than as I mentioned, I'm a Buddhist. I've been meditating since 2009, and I started doing this recently, like actually since October 7th, and it has helped me not be so it's helped me to not hate. It's helped me to not use, and that is. It started out when I would just every night when I'd get in bed and I sleep on my side, and just when I get to that point where I'm all comfy and this pillow's in the right place and I got like a huggy pillow, I'm hugging on that, and just as I sit there, I just think, this is nice. And I just kind of I just settle into that thought. And lately, the other night last night I went to go see a movie at IFC Center, favorite place to see a movie in New York, and I was early, so I just went down the street to a fountain, and I just sat there in front of the fountain. I put my phone in my pocket, and I just stood looking at the fountain and watching people walk by and just seeing life in New York, and again I just sat there and said, this is nice. And I literally I feel a thrill just saying it now. Like we as a human species need to spend more time doing that.
Yeah.
And I think if we can, there's no problem that we can't solve. But I think the more we retreat into our screens, and again, being addicted to a screen doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be a white nationalist. But it might mean you're a Republican who hates Democrats, or a Democrat who hates Republicans, or a socialist who hates capitalists, or a capitalist who hates socialists, or a Catholic who hates Protestants, or a Protestant who hates Catholics, what have you. The screens exacerbate our already innate human tribal tendency, because it's an instant connection to whatever our tribe is, to that Orwellian nationalism of saying, like, these are my people, we're the good guys, they're the bad guys can all go to hell, the good people are gonna, we're this, and the screens are exacerbating that. So I mentioned in the other BI piece, there is a growing movement to not allow kids under 16 to have smartphones, and to get more kids out there playing in nature, unsupervised, getting their knees skinned, doing stupid stuff, and realizing the consequences of it. But that's what we need to grow up into healthy people. And the way a big factor in the growing radicalization and the growing polarization, again, and I love, Kevin, that you nailed it with laziness on this movement ideology, because that does nail it. And I think a lot of this laziness is, we now have a generation of human beings, if not two generations of human beings, who grew up on screens, who were conditioned from their earliest formative minutes to expect an instant response the second they touch something. The second they touch this, they want to see something happen. They touch that, they want to see something else happen. If you hand them a book, say, hey, read this great book. What? I'm not going to read a book. I can't sit and watch a 10-minute video. How am I going to sit and read a book? So it's really like destroying our attention span. It's making us expect instant gratification in everything, and that's why it makes it so much easier for white nationalists to approach Joe Pissed Off White Kid, because Joe Pissed Off White Kid was lazy in 1986, 87. He still didn't want to do the work that it takes to get a proper girlfriend. Nowadays, he's even lazier because he wants everything to happen instantly, because he's used to having it happen on a screen. Anything that requires imagination or effort or work, that's boring. That's a chore. That's hard to do. So that's really what we're up against. I think all of our societal polarization that we are experiencing is not about an ideology or another. It's not about socialism versus capitalism. It's not about oppressed versus oppressor. It's all about these screens conditioning us to expect things instantly and not having the wherewithal to put in work and to do what it takes to accomplish great things.
All right. I also want to ask you, Johnny Pissed Off White Boy. You have a very jovial presence about yourself.
Yeah.
Doesn't kind of seem to fit with a Johnny Pissed Off White Boy. How do you, the juxtaposition of those two characters, how do they work out?
Well, I was certainly Johnny Pissed Off White Kid. White Boy. I like Johnny Pissed Off White Boy. That's good. I always say Joe Pissed Off White Kid, but I'm going to start saying Johnny Pissed Off White Boy. I was Johnny Pissed Off White Boy for sure. And it was because I was addicted to that kind of behavior. I was in the throes of addiction. I was under the influence of antisocial behavior, under the influence of hate. And again, it's my greatest asset now. Mm-hmm. And being real, I've lamented my physical issues I deal with right now. In addition to all my joints being destroyed, I have post-concussion syndrome, which means chronic migraines, mood swings. Sometimes I get frustrated to tears trying to tie my shoes. So I have days where I wake up and I'm just like morbidly depressed. Mm-hmm. And knowing it's a physiological thing, I'm just like, okay, I just got to get through this day and then I'll be okay. And when I have days where I'm not morbidly depressed, I am overjoyed that I'm not in that place anymore. And also, again, this is nice. Like, there's so many little stupid things about life. Every single day you could go through so many moments of this is nice. And when I do that, not only does it make my life a much more enjoyable process, but when I am talking to Johnny Pissed Off White Boy, he sees that. Mm-hmm. And as much as he's going to cuss me out for being a traitor or whatever, he's this and that, I'm the scum of the earth. No matter what he says or does, I'm touching his heart with my presence just by demonstrating what happiness looks like. And another thing that I need to remind myself, because believe me, there are many days where I'm like, all right, I've had it with Johnny Pissed Off White Kid, boy, whatever you want to call him. I'm done with dealing with these kids. I can't do it anymore. I want to go be a scuba instructor in Honduras. Like, to hell with all this. I have to remind myself that quite often Joe's not just pissed off because he doesn't have a girlfriend. He's pissed off because he doesn't know what genuine happiness looks like. He's never seen it in his life. His parents were miserable. They've never seen it in their lives. Like, there's generational trauma happening. And when you, again, bring back in the compassion piece, I have to have compassion for Joe or Johnny, whatever his name is going to be. I have to bear witness to his suffering without judgment and just be there and be present for it and let him know that I'm here to help in whatever way. And what that involves is a lot of listening to a whole lot of shit I don't want to hear. But that listening creates a rapport that, and again, the more time I spend with this kid, the more he's going to see what genuine happiness looks like. And honestly, that's all people, every human being, that's really all we want in our life, is we want to be happy, we want to experience love. And if we haven't experienced those things, we're going to be pretty salty, not much fun to be around.
I agree. It's a nice thing that everybody should feel.
Sure.
Arno, that was all the questions I had for today. Is there anything that you wanted to touch on? Or, I mean, we've covered a pretty broad range of things here, but...
you had excellent questions, Kevin. I love how you led the conversation. I don't think there's a whole lot more to cover. I would just like to reiterate that hate and violence are preventable, and that's what we do at Parents for Peace. People can find Parents for Peace at parentsforpeace.org with the number 4. At the website, we have a help email. We also have a toll-free North America-wide helpline at 844-49-PEACE. When people call that number and they're concerned about a radicalized loved one, we have a brilliant intake staff. And if we feel it's a situation where we can help, we will begin a relationship with that family. Our services are all completely pro bono. It doesn't cost anybody anything.
And can people call any time of day, night? How's the response time?
We're manned in a 9 to 5 session right now, but if people call after hours, we do have a messaging service that will get us.
All right, good.
So we're not necessarily brain surgeons on call, but we're building up to that capacity. We're always, if people are in a space where they're able to help fund us, that's what the funding goes toward, is to scale, build capacity. Eventually, we would love to have a 24-hour manned helpline and increase the scale of the families we're able to help.
All right. Thanks so much for joining us today. And everyone, that is parentsforpeace.org. So check them out. I'm your host, Kevin Riley. Till next time. Hi, I'm a producer on Authorized Account. If you like this episode, then you should check out our new podcast and comment below with the names of people you'd love to hear us interview.